Today our learning aim is to recap your set work Eine Kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart, the Minuet and Trio, and also to practice some listening questions together in this video. Just like last time, if the text is in this red colour, that means that I want you to write that down as notes in your book. If it's black, you don't need to write it down. So the first thing we're going to do is go through everything we know about your first set work from Area Study 1, which is Eine Kleine Nachtmusik. So it's written by the composer Mozart, and it was written in 1787. It's important that you know that date off by heart. It was written in the classical era. Mozart is one of our key classical composers, and it's got a 3/4 time signature, which means you've got 3 crotchet beats in every bar, and we can see that just there at the beginning of the music. It was written for a string quartet, which is violin 1, violin 2, viola and cello, and it's important that we know what clefs those instruments are written in. So our violins are written in treble clef, our viola is written in alto clef, which is a bit more unusual, and to read this clef we need to remember that the middle line is always middle C, and then we also have the cello, which is written in bass clef. And this piece of music is in minuet and trio form, so that's the structure of the music, and we're going to go through what that means now. So in our minuet and trio form, we've got 3 overall sections. We've got the minuet, the trio, and then the minuet comes back again. So it's kind of like there's a overarching ternary form where we've got one section, then a different section, and then the first section comes back again. But then within those sections, there's smaller sections. So in the minuet, we've got an A section and a B section, and both of these repeat. So we've got A, repeat, B, repeat. Then we go on to the trio, which has got its own A, so that's different to there. Its own A that repeats, and it's B that repeats. And then when the minuet comes back, we've just got A and B, and there's no repeats in that section. So from when we've studied this in class, you should know what these different sections sound like, and from hearing a section, you should know which section of the piece it is. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to play you a section of the music. It's also written on the screen, and you have to try and work out what section of the minuet and trio the music is from. So here is your first section. So that was section A of the minuet, so the very first thing that we hear when we're listening to the Minuet and Trio by Mozart. Here is your next section to guess, and again it's on the screen. So that was section A of the trio, so the first bit of the trio that we hear. A few clues on the score, whether that was the section where it changes key to D major, and also the section where it is sotto voce, which is under the voice. Here's your next section to listen to and guess. That was section B of the minuet, and a big clue there is that it ends in the same way as section A of the minuet. Here's your last section to guess. So that was section B of the trio, and again a big clue for that is that the end of section B, it sounds the same as the end of section A in the trio as well. Okay, so now we're going to go through each section of the piece of music, and we're going to analyse the key features in each section and just revise what we already know about these sections. So we're starting with Minuet section A, and it starts in the key of G major. It's got 1 sharp in its key signature, and it is in G major. The piece of music has got a 3/4 time signature, and it's got an allegretto tempo, which means it's quite fast or fairly quick. It starts on a forte dynamic, which means it starts loud, and it also has an anacrusis, or a pickup, at the beginning of the section, which is where instead of having a full bar at the beginning, a full 3-beat bar, we've just got 1 beat on its own that acts as a pickup to the rest of the music. We have got some appoggiaturas in this section of music, which are those ornaments that don't have a line through them. We also call them leaning notes. And we've also got some trills. So those are the two types of ornamentation in this piece of music. We start with a two-part texture at the beginning of this section, where both violins play together. They play an octave apart, but otherwise they're playing exactly the same tune. And the same happens with the viola and the cello. So we've got the music split into those two parts there. But in bar 5, we split into a 4-part texture. So this is where each individual instrument is playing their own part, they're not doubling. We have got a hemiola at the end of this section, which is a rhythmic device, which we've talked about before, which is where a piece of music is in a 3 time. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but then something happens to shift the pulse so that it sounds like it's in 2 times. So it sounds like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that's mainly because of the trills in this bit. So we're going to listen to section A. I'm just going to point out that hemiola to you. One, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So most of it has that clear 1, 2, 3 beat, but then just at the end of the section there we get a hemiola where we get a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. In the viola, we also have a specific playing technique which we need to know about, which is called double stopping, where instead of playing one note at a time, there at the end the viola plays 2 notes at once on its last 2 beats. And finally, this section ends with a very strong perfect cadence. So here we've got a D7 chord, D dominant 7th chord, and then we end on chord 1, which is G. So we've got a 5-7-1 cadence there, which is a really, really strong perfect cadence. So the next slide you're going to see is some notes for you to take down in your book about this section. So if you pause the screen on that slide and then you take down those notes. Now we're going to look at the Minuet section B and analyse the key features in this section. So we're still in G major. We have still got an anacrusis or an upbeat, but now we've got a piano dynamic. So we've got a soft dynamic which contrasts the section A dynamic. The violins are playing legato or smoothly because they've got these slur markings on top of the melody, and the violins are also playing in unison at this point. So they're playing an octave apart, but again they're playing the same melody. The texture in this section is quite a bit thinner than the texture in section A because we've just got this melody in unison and then the 3 notes in the lower instruments. So it's a thinner texture, and we've got a descending melodic sequence in that first bit of the phrase. So we're just going to listen out for that descending melodic sequence now. And then the last 4 bars of the music, so bars 5 to 8 of this section, are the same as bars 5 to 8 of section A of the Minuet. So because these bars are the same, we've got the trills again, we've got the hemiola again, we've got the double stopping again, and we've also got that really strong, perfect 5-7-1 cadence at the end. Another important feature of this section is we've got something called diminished chords in this section. So here's one diminished chord on this beat, and the other diminished chord is on this beat. So a diminished chord is not a major chord or a minor chord. So this would be a major chord, this would be a minor chord, and this is a diminished chord. So it's quite a dissonant chord, and here we have got an A diminished chord, and here we've got a G diminished chord. So the harmony is a bit more dissonant in this section from the use of diminished chords. So we'll just have a listen to that there. And that's section B. So now I'm going to go back onto a slide with some notes on it for section B, and you can take a note from that slide. So now we're in the trio section of the piece, and we're going to look at section A first. So here we are still in 3/4, so the time signature is the same. We've still got an anacrusis or an upbeat, but here the key signature has changed. So here we've moved around the circle of fifths. So instead of having one sharp, we've got two sharps, which means we've gone from being in G major to being in D major. And when we go up a fifth in terms of the key, so we go up one sharp, that's called the dominant. So G is our tonic and D is the dominant. So we've modulated here or changed key to the dominant key with two sharps. We've still got our anacrusis, and we've also got this performance direction here, which we pronounce sotto voce, and it means under the voice or half voice. So we're playing it softly. We've got our soft dynamic here as well. And we've got some chromaticism at the melody towards the end there. And there's one bar that is completely chromatic, which is this bar. So we've got some chromatic movement in the melody there. So we're just going to have a listen to that. So there was the chromatic movement in the melody. We'd also say that this melody is legato as well, and it's also conjunct. So that's the melody line. In the accompaniment, we've got the violin 2 and the viola playing this alternating quaver figure, and that kind of fills out the harmony and makes the chords. And then the cello is playing the bass notes, but it's playing them an octave apart in each bar, and it's playing that staccato. And then finally at the end of this section, just like the other ones, we've got a really strong 5/7/1 cadence, but this time it's not in G, it's in D. So we've got A7 to D as our cadence there, which is a perfect cadence. And then we've got the second section of the trio, which is section B. We're still in D major here because the whole of the trio is in D major. We start with another anacrusis or another pickup, and we start with a forte dynamic as well. And then the first 4 bars of this section, the top 3 parts are playing together, and they're playing this rising quaver figure. And we also have another example of sequence, but this time it's an ascending sequence. Let's have a listen out for that. And then after that, we just basically have a repeat of section A of the trio again. So that takes us up to the end of the trio. And then section B of the trio repeats again. And then here are the notes for you to write down for the trio section B. So now that we've analysed what happens in the individual sections of this piece, I just want to remind you how that fits into the overall structure. So we analyse the A section of the minuet, which gets repeated, and we analyse the B section of the minuet, which also gets repeated. Then we go into the trio, which we analyse. So we analyse section A and section B, and both of those get repeated individually. And then once we've heard that section B of the trio, you've got to remember that the minuet comes back again, and we hear section A and section B, but they don't get repeated. And that's everything we need to know for Eine Kleine Nachtmusik. Okay, so now for the second part of today's lesson, we're going to do 3 practice listening questions together. So for each question, I'm going to play you the audio twice, and in your books, I'd like you to answer however many questions you've got on that piece of music. And then once you've heard it and you've answered the questions, then we're going to go through the answers. So I'm only going to play each extract twice, so if you need to pause it to write down the answers, please do. Here is the extract for question 1 for the first time. And here is the music for extract 1 for the second time. So in your books you need to have answers for those 4 questions on the screen, and then we're going to go through the answers on the next slide. Okay, so we're going to go through these answers. So part A was describe the tonality of this music. It was major, it was in a major key. The meter was 4/4, so it had a time signature of 4/4 with 4 beats in every bar. The texture of the music was monophonic, which is not one we come across a lot, but it means that there was only one sound at any one time, and it was being played by the cello, and the cello was only playing one note at a time. It wasn't playing more than one note together. And finally, the tempo of the music, it was generally fast, it was allegro, but at the end of the music there was a rit or a ritardando, which means it slowed down at the end of the extract. So we're just going to listen to it one more time just so you can pick out those features. Here's the track for question 2, which I'm going to play you twice. So the tonality of that extract was a minor, it was in a minor key. The first 2 bars of the music could best be described as broken chords, and that was being played right at the beginning, and the texture of the music was melody and accompaniment. Some people might have written polyphonic because there was a lot of movement in the left hand and the right hand parts, but there was one clear tune and the other part was just playing an accompaniment. It was just playing broken chords. So he'd still describe that texture as melody and accompaniment. I'm now going to play you the audio for question 3. There's 3 parts to question 3 as well. Question C is really tricky, but try and use your circle of fifths to give it a go, and bear in mind whether or not this piece of music is in a major key or a minor key. I'm going to play the extract 2 times again. Here it is for a second time. Okay, the answers for question 3. The first question, identify the ornament used in bar 1, so right at the beginning of the extract. It was a trill, so alternating rapidly between 2 notes. Question B, the notes played in the left hand were quavers. That was an important thing to note. So it was a slow tempo, that piece of music. So it was what we call largo with an Italian term. And finally, the last question, this was really tricky. To start with, you have to look at the 4 sharps and use the circle of fifths to work out what major key signature has 4 sharps, and that's E major if you work your way around the circle of fifths. However, that piece of music was in a minor key, so then we need to find the relative minor to E major. And to find the relative minor, if you remember, we count back 3 steps or 3 semitones. So that piece of music was in C sharp minor. But do not worry if you didn't get that one. Once we're back in school, we will go over all of that again. So that's everything from the video today. We've revised Eine Kleine Nachtmusik and gone through an analysis of all of the sections and the key features, and we've also practiced doing some listening questions together. Now I need you to go and access the quiz, answer some questions on Eine Kleine Nachtmusik, and also practice some independent listening questions as well.